Hello, everyone, and thank you for viewing my presentation today. My name is Hannah Cole, and this is my presentation on creating the conditions for motivation in music education because I am an elementary music teacher. One student is willing to take a risk, make a mistake, and try again. Another student becomes discouraged almost immediately and decides they just can't do it. Before taking this course, Psychology of Classroom Learning, I probably would have described motivation as something students either had or didn't have. But throughout this semester, I've discovered something more. I began to understand that motivation isn't something we simply give students. It's something we intentionally have to create through the relationships we build, the learning experiences we design, and the environment we create every day. 4 lessons that I believe I can make a meaningful difference in our classrooms. The first lesson is one that seems simple, but I believe it's one of the most powerful. The first lesson is that confidence grows through small successes. The second lesson is that students are more motivated when they understand the purpose behind what they're learning. The third lesson is that effort, not perfection, is what leads to growth. And finally, and the most important lesson, students are willing to take risks only after they feel like they truly belong. The first lesson I learned is that confidence grows through small successes. One of the most meaningful assignments I completed this semester was applying what we were learning to a real-life situation. For my first motivation project, I worked with expectancy value theory with my husband, who wanted to become more physically active but struggled to stay consistent. Like many people, he would set really big, ambitious goals and become overwhelmed and eventually give up because he didn't see immediate results. As I reflected on what we had been learning in this course, I realized that the problem wasn't a lack of desire, it was a lack of confidence. His starting point felt too overwhelming, and instead of encouraging him to do more, I encouraged him to do less. We replaced intense workouts with simple goals of taking 15-minute walks each day, and we tracked those walks on a calendar and celebrated each success along the way. And little by little, those small accomplishments help him build confidence because he could finally see that success was possible. That experience helped me understand something the research reinforced through this course. People are much more likely to stay motivated when they believe they can succeed. And confidence isn't something students either have or don't have. It's something that grows when teachers intentionally create opportunities for success. We provide encouragement and gradually increase the challenge as students become more capable. As I looked back and reflected in my own classroom, I started thinking about the students who walk into the music room already believing they're not musical, and some hesitate to sing, and others avoid volunteering, and some become discouraged after just making one mistake. Before this course, I might have assumed they simply lacked motivation. And now I wonder if what they really need is an opportunity to experience success. The first strategy to put this into practice is to break learning into smaller, achievable steps. Instead of expecting students to master a new skill all at once, I want to create opportunities for small successes along the way. Each small success helps build confidence for the next challenge. The second strategy is to celebrate progress, not just perfect performance. It's easy to recognize the student who already excels, but some of the biggest accomplishments happen when a student finally attempts something they were afraid to try or improves from where they started. Those moments deserve to be noticed and celebrated as well. The first strategy to put this into practice is to break learning into smaller, achievable steps. Instead of expecting students to master a new skill all at once, I want to create opportunities for. The third strategy is to provide feedback that highlights effort and growth. Rather than simply saying, "good job," I want my feedback to be specific. I want students to hear things like, "I noticed you kept trying even when that rhythm was difficult. Your practice really paid off today." That kind of feedback helps students connect their success with the work they put into learning. In my music classroom, this might look like celebrating a student who finally keeps the steady beat or correctly plays a short melody or confidently sings in front of the class for the first time. Those may seem like small accomplishments, but for some of those students, this is huge for them. It's a huge milestone. At the beginning of every school year, my goal is to create as many opportunities for those small wins as possible. People are much more motivated when they understand the purpose behind what they're doing. When learning feels meaningful and personally relevant, we're far more willing to invest our time, attention, and effort. That made me go back to my own teaching again. There have been times when I've spent so much energy teaching a musical skill that I haven't stopped to explain why it matters. I know a lot of times in music education, we think about our next performance and we think about learning this music so we can have a good concert, but we have to explain that to our students. I know why the reading rhythms and singing together or playing instruments is valuable, but my students don't automatically know that. If they don't understand the purpose behind an activity, it's easy for learning to feel like it's just another task. The first strategy I'll use is to explain the why before the what. Before we begin learning a new song or practicing rhythms or playing classroom instruments, I want my students to understand why we're doing it. I'll help them see that music isn't just about performing correctly, it's about developing creativity and collaboration, listening skills, perseverance, and confidence that they'll use in many areas of life. The second strategy is to give students meaningful opportunities to make choices. Even simple choices like selecting an instrument or choosing a movement activity or volunteering to lead a part of the lesson it can help students feel ownership over their learning. When students have a voice or feel like they have a voice, they're more likely to become active participants rather than passive learners. Lesson 3 is teach students that effort leads to growth. During my second motivation project, which was causal attribution theory with my 3-year-old son, for this project, he was learning to dress himself independently while potty training. And every day he had multiple opportunities to practice. But if he couldn't pull up his pants on the first try, he would become frustrated and almost immediately ask me to do it for him. And like many parents, it's faster for me to step in and help. But I realized that every time I took over, I was unintentionally sending the message that he couldn't do it himself. As I applied what I was learning in this course, I began changing my approach. Instead of praising the outcome, I focused on his effort. I broke the task into smaller steps, acknowledged his frustration, and pointed out the persistence he was showing. Rather than saying, "Good job," I found myself saying things like, "You kept trying," or "Look how much better you're getting because you didn't give up." And over time, I watched his confidence grow, not because the task became easier, but because he began believing that practice has helped him improve. If I truly want my students to believe that effort leads to growth, then I have to make sure my classroom reflects that belief every day. And the first strategy I'll use is to normalize mistakes. I want my students to understand that mistakes aren't something to avoid. They're evidence that learning is happening. Whether a student misses a rhythm, sings the wrong pitch, or struggles to play a melody, I want those moments to feel like opportunities to learn rather than lessons or reasons to give up. Even in my own mistakes, I want to be able to share with them that I also make mistakes. The second strategy is to give feedback that focuses on the learning process. Instead of saying, "Good job," I'll be intentional about pointing out what students did that helped them improve. I want them to hear things like, "I noticed you kept trying even when that was challenging," or "Your practice is really paying off." And that kind of feedback helps students connect improvement to their effort rather than their natural ability or their talent. A third strategy is to provide support without taking away ownership. The project with my son reminded me how tempting it is to step in when someone is struggling, even other students offering to help a struggling student. It might mean breaking a task into smaller parts, modeling a skill, or offering a hint instead of immediately giving the answer. My goal is to provide just enough support so students experience the satisfaction of figuring it out for themselves. But they have to have the opportunity to struggle sometimes and then figuring it out for themselves. Lesson 4 is create a classroom where every student belongs. Everything I learned this semester, I realized the first 3 lessons all depend on this final one. Students can have confidence, understand the purpose behind their learning, and believe that effort leads to growth, but none of those things matter if they don't feel like they belong. This lesson became especially meaningful after listening to Brené Brown speak about belonging and courage. One idea that stayed with me is that people are most willing to be vulnerable when they know they are accepted for who they are. That really challenged my thinking because learning requires vulnerability. Every day we ask students to answer questions they might get wrong, attempt skills they haven't mastered, and perform music or otherwise in front of their peers. Those moments require courage. As a music teacher, I ask students to do things that can feel especially intimidating. I ask them to sing in front of classmates, perform on instruments they've never played before, move to music, improvise, and sometimes make mistakes where everyone can hear them or see them. If students are worried about being embarrassed or judged, they're much less likely to participate no matter how engaging the lesson might be. This helped me see that belonging isn't something that simply happens over time. It's something teachers intentionally have to create. For this coming school year, I want belonging to be something my students experience from the very first day, not something they have to earn over time. Creating that kind of classroom starts with intentional decisions that communicate you matter here. First strategy is to build trust through consistent relationships. I want every student to know that they'll be greeted with kindness, treated with respect, and encouraged regardless of their ability level. Trust isn't built in one big moment. It's built through small interactions that happen every single day. The second strategy is to create a classroom where mistakes are viewed as normal part of learning. I'll model that mindset by responding to mistakes with curiosity instead of criticism. Whether a student sings the wrong pitch or misses a rhythm or gives an incorrect answer, I want my response to communicate, that's okay, let's learn from it together. When students know they won't be judged for making mistakes, they're much more willing to participate and take risks again. The third strategy is to intentionally recognize every student's contribution. In a music classroom, not every student will be the strongest singer or the most confident performer, but every student has something valuable to contribute. I want to celebrate students who encourage their classmates, who show persistence, who demonstrate kindness, who ask thoughtful questions, or even quietly improve over time. When we recognize those qualities, students begin to understand that they are valued for who they are, not just for how well they perform. For this presentation, it goes back to that beginning part of myself that I thought were all separate. The wife Hannah, the mom Hannah, the teacher Hannah, and now the student Hannah. And then I start thinking about my own experiences as a student, as a child. The truth is, I was that student. I was the kid who rehearsed my answer over and over in my head before I raised my hand. Even when I thought I knew the answer, I worried about getting it wrong. And it often felt safe to stay quiet rather than risk making a mistake in front of my classmates. And even in music, it was no different. There were people in my life who told me that I was talented and I had a good singing voice, but believing them was much harder than hearing the words. I loved music, but I didn't always want to sing in front of other people. I was afraid of being judged. I was afraid of making a mistake and afraid of not being good enough. And then I had that one teacher who helped me change things. My high school choir teacher saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself, and she challenged me, she encouraged me, and gently pushed me outside of my comfort zone. More importantly, she created a classroom where I felt safe enough to take those risks. I knew that if I made a mistake, I wouldn't be embarrassed or judged. I would simply be encouraged to keep growing. Looking back now, I realized she wasn't just teaching me how to sing. She was creating the conditions where I could believe in myself. And eventually what led me to go into education today. As I've shared these 4 lessons today, building confidence through small successes, helping students find purpose, teaching that effort leads to growth, and creating a classroom where every student belongs, I keep coming back to that teacher. She lived those lessons long before I had the language to describe them. That's why this course has meant so much for me. It didn't just teach me about motivation, it helped me understand why certain teachers leave such a lasting impact on our lives. And as I begin this upcoming school year, my hope is that one day one of my own students looks back and said, my music teacher believed in me before I believed in myself. And if I can be that teacher for even one child, then I'll know I've created the conditions where motivation can grow. Before this semester, I might have believed that motivating students meant finding ways to make lessons more exciting or encourage them to work harder. And now I see motivation very differently. I believe my responsibility is to create the conditions where motivation can grow. That means creating opportunities for students to experience success early so they begin building confidence. It means helping them understand why their learning matters so they find purpose in what they're doing. It means responding to mistakes in ways that encourage persistence instead of discouragement. And above all, it creates a classroom where every student feels respected, valued, and safe enough to take risks. For this upcoming school year, that's the teacher I hope to become. If my students leave my classroom believing they are capable, knowing their voice matters, and feeling excited to keep learning, then I will know I've done far more than teach music. I'll know I've helped create the conditions where motivation can flourish. Thank you for allowing me to share my journey, and I hope these reflections encourage you as you prepare for a new school year. And I hope they remind you, as they've reminded me, that motivation isn't something we give our students. It's something we intentionally cultivate through the relationships we build, the experiences we design, and the classroom communities we create every day. Thank you.